Okay.
Yeah.
You can come to
Yeah.
And I love weird things don't know.
Distress. I was like,
Okay.
that's true. I'm gonna find a point.
So,
It's on the floor.
yes, I'm here, but nobody else is here. So, please still have it. Oh, hey. Thank you. Sorry. Technical difficulties. It's gonna fall again.
So, quick question.
Can you see? I see that the slideshow is now backwards.
You want? Yeah.
Yeah, it. Hold on. Oops. I'm just gonna have to turn you around so you can see.
You want to put it in this, or you got it there?
Well, I can't tell if it's pointed in the right direction.
Okay, here, I'll
But it doesn't have drive.
Here.
You just have to hold it.
There we go. Okay.
Push it, not very easy.
Good idea.
The Secrets of Scripture. So, this is a Bible study. We're going to be studying Matthew. But before we study Matthew, I want to give an introduction of what this Bible study is and for why. We're going to look into the ancient Greek biblical text and study it from a Hellenic point of view. So, I'll try to move fairly quick because I know you're limited. So, why study the Bible in the ancient Greek? Well, the Septuagint, the LXX, is the oldest biblical text, dating back to 3rd century. It predates Dead Sea Scrolls and most Hebrew texts, as ancient Hebrew died for almost a millennia. Somebody asked me, they were like, well, how could it be? Because we found, Hebrew way back in 1200 on a pot. And I said, well, why did it die for almost 1,000 years, right? And so, in speculating about the ancient Hebrew, I wondered, how could that be? And how could the ancient Greek be so complex with all of its libraries? And I'll read through one. So, the ancient Greek as a language contains Atticisms and what's also called hapax legomena, which are unique word forms. So unique word variations in a dynamic that cannot be found within structure of the ancient Hebrew. And we have endless source texts like Homer and Lucian and so many that of different genres that it's overwhelming and more than any person can read in their lifetime. So we have these source texts that we can refer back to and libraries that existed that were in Greek. For example, in Egypt, Alexandria. It was probably most likely in Greek. So there are no ancient Hebrew libraries or literature at all that we can find, that we can refer back to from, before 3rd century BC. So that's suspicious. And so I'm like, okay, how did I get into this? It's like, I wanted to know the most esoteric interpretation of the Bible and looking for symbolism and looking for what truth is. I'm like, okay, well then the New Testament, it was written in Greek. And then anything that you look up, it'll always say it's written in ancient Hebrew, but we have so much evidence that that is a fabrication. Ancient Hebrew seems to pop up out of nowhere in the 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD and incomplete until the Masoretic text in 10th century AD. So, 1,000 years AD, there is no complete ancient Hebrew Bible. Ancient Hebrew is also not seen to evolve naturally as a language, and what did exist was very simple. Suggesting that it was constructed and forged out of the more complex, expansive Greek. The Greek contains 1.5 million unique words, while the Hebrew only contains 6,000 to 7,000. I have the exact number in the next slide, or the one after. So, thanks to someone. The Greek appears to be a back translation from Proto-Hebrew translation for a propaganda campaign to own the previous text for Qumran sect of the cult. And this drove out any references to any substances, any divining or healing or spiritual experiences, replacing with vague and fantastical terms like magic or sorcery, which then obscured a deeper connection to what the texts say, and such as drug-induced divination and spiritual practices at the time. And they wanted to drive that out because they replaced this reality with a narrative in order to control the population, as well as, where humanity ended up going, right? So if I always wonder, like, what would life look like if we didn't have our modern interpretation of Christianity? And I think everything would be entirely different, and how we see the world, and our level of intelligence, and our level of how we interact with people socially, and so many things like philosophy and other aspects, if we had the real text of the Bible. There would be way less dishonesty and toxicity within the church, in a way, because everything would be laid out plainly. So the replacement of the Greek with the Hebrew shows that the Greek was so complex and so far greater, more technical, abstract, and it was replaced with Hebrew, which is simplified and concrete, which makes the interpretation of the Bible almost nonsense in meaning, and everything becomes just metaphor. It becomes, oh, what does this mean personally for me, but really vague in what the story is. So this was a deliberate process of simplification. The beauty of the Greek was flattened and condensed into the Hebrew language, and then translated it into Latin, and then translated it into English, right? And so now it's been translated, and now we have this story that isn't just a story, but it affects people personally, and they create their whole lives around it. And it's entirely dishonest to do something like that, to have a community where people believe so deeply in a faith that is entirely based in falsity. And that makes me extremely angry, to be honest. So this deliberate process of simplification, where deep philosophical, mystical, spiritual meanings were actually tied to hundreds of years of ancient mystery rites and pharmacy, which became flattened and reduced to their most basic forms in Hebrew. So, long story short, Hebrew was a primitive and formerly extinct language, which was purposefully reconstructed to eradicate the text of any mystery and any teachings related to pharmaca or pagan lineage, or and it was reduced to a rigid linear form with the limited vocabulary as I have here. It's 8,198 words and only 2,099 roots. Hebrew could not possibly encapsulate the depth of meaning that Greek is able to convey. We have these words in Greek that are so vast with such dense interpretation, with all these texts that refer to what things actually mean. And by just saying, oh, this means one word with nothing else, that's just like completely shallow, right? So the Septuagint's philosophical language is evident in treatment of divine concepts. Words like logos, which has 8 pages worth of what it means, and ion and Sophia, they carry these meanings that far exceed the depths of Hebrew, creating a chasm of understanding, and it was done on purpose. And where was is what really gets me, was where was Israel in antiquity? So, all three ethnonyms, Hebreos, Hebrew, Israel, and Judea, Judeos, they enter the Greek literary world altogether fully formed in a single translation project, and which is entirely odd. From a philological, which means somebody who analyzes texts and their context and words, there's no evolution, there's no passing mentions, there's no genealogical buildup, no cross-cultural references, no ethnographic background, and no gradual Hellenic recognition, and instead it's fully developed and appears all at once in Greek in the 3rd century BC. Which is crazy because Herodotus catalogs dozens of Near Eastern peoples, Hippocrates, writes about Asians, Scythians, Egyptians, all these antiquarian Greek writers of all sorts, in tragedies, philosophies, Orphic texts. They all write about other groups from the area, and there is no mention of Hebrew or Israel. That's a little interesting. That's a little suspicious, right? How could that be? I don't know. So it's like, okay, well, let's look at what we do have in Greek and try to make sense of it. So why would the Bible be mistranslated, and why should we do the work to read the original Greek? It's because for the first time, we'd be able to see, after thousands of years, what truth really would be. And why would they try to hide that? Because there's a lot that's pretty icky that they wanted to cover up. And so in the 4th, 5th century, Christian priests defined anyone outside of their way as pagans, which was a term created by Christians to demonize those outside their doctrine. They did not blend with the classical world of thousands, hundreds and thousands of years prior, and the traditions and ritual from the ages before, right? And they wanted to assert legal control and social control over the population through making ritual worship and practice impossible, as they were able to perform legally at a certain point. And then for the first time in history, sex and drugs took on a negative moral connotation, and prostitutes and homosexuals became taboo and illegal. However, for ages, all of that was just intermingled with daily life, with education, with politics, with religion. It was all intermingled, and they saw anything outside of Christianity as polluted, even women and even the language itself. So these texts offer a more expansive view just through using the language, and we could have a more expansive view of the divine and the relationship between humanity and the divine from a perspective that mirrors much of the Bacchic mystery. So we'll talk a little bit about what that is. And so during the Bronze Age, there was a mystery and a knowledge of pharmacology, well known within a priesthood linking sacred to altered states of consciousness and divination, and they used different drugs to promote healing and inspiration and spiritual connection, and it was all part of the culture and human civilization at the time. What can we learn from the Septuagint that didn't exist in earlier Greek tradition? What it contains is there's a single jealous high god, which eliminates all other divine daimonic intermediaries. Daimonic means different archetypes and pieces within the psyche, and it directly undermines Orphic, Pythian, Median, and Enigmatic structures of pharmaca-based ecstatic ritual. There's a rival priestly caste, and purity rules and mirrors the way Hellenistic powers try to weaken traditional temple cults. There is a chosen group of people. They demonize serpents and drugs and idols and these ecstatic rites from the pagans, right? And these are all signatures of the Echidnaic priestess culture. They're a polemic against prophetic ecstasy and pharmacon vision language, replacing ritual trance with obedience to a text and condemnation of venom healing, using the venom in order to create altered states of consciousness. And this death rebirth experience, which was seen a lot in cults of Isis, cult of Aphrodite, Apollo, etc. So this is why in the study I'm not going to base it on theology, because it's not built and rooted in shame. No theology, no fear. So we'll approach these from a Hellenic lens, embracing the ancient Greek text and exploring the multidimensional nature. The first Christians in the Greek-speaking world used the Septuagint. Paul recites Septuagint and other ancient Greek texts. And even in Revelation they cite the Septuagint. They never cite Hebrew. So I'm going to give an example of how complex the ancient Greek is. So let's compare the two. In Hebrew and English it says, "Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." In the Greek it says metanoite. It means to make a change to your perception, for the reason that the basileia, which is feminine, which is a dominion, it's not kingdom, it's queendom, the goddess dominion of heaven, which Orion is a concave hemisphere resting on the verge of earth, upborne by the pillars of Atlas, which opens and closes like a gate, has approached as if within arm's reach, is my translation of Matthew 3:2. So, as you can see, we get, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And what does it really mean? It opens up because there's so much complexity in even just one word, right? That you wouldn't have seen before. I would not have known that Basileia, the kingdom, was actually queendom. That's crazy.
Love that.
Yeah. So in the study, we'll see evidence of the use of magic and pharmaca. And in antiquity, there's no distinctions, again, between medicine, religion, science, spirituality. And we have an opportunity to return to truth, even if it doesn't look conventional. We'll see what these texts say within the mystery context. And we can see for ourselves through using resources that we all can access and do the work, such as Perseus Tufts. You can Google it. It's a lexicon. It has the LSJ or the TLG library for comparison and word usage that Greek far reaches beyond Hebrew. And why aren't people looking into this or talking about this? It's usually because money, career, reputation are too tied into religious beliefs, or the fear and belief in God would become threatened. But the work is free because it's the truth, right? It is looking to see what it really says. And if it's been mistranslated and distorted, all humans should deserve to see what it originally was, no matter what we find, right? But again, I had a video, perhaps to play. I don't know if it'll work, actually.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Is Septuagint Greek? That
Yes.
word is Greek?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Septa is like, what is it, 7? I don't know, that's kind of what I...
So 70 rabbis come together. That's the legend.
Story,
Right?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I had a video, but I guess it's not going to work right now.
It was just playing for a second there, and it turned out.
Okay, well, where's it? It says, no. Okay, well, it doesn't really need to be played, I suppose, but, now we're going to go into why Jesus was arrested.
Oh, great.
this is your chop. This is like the initiation. This is like the worst of the worst, okay? Oh, well, probably not really, but this is pretty bad, right? Mark 14, 51, 52 says, well, we asked this question, what was Jesus doing arrested in a public park, 4 a.m., with a naked kid saying, why are you coming at me as if I'm some sort of trafficker? And we'll break it down. And the boy, neoniskos, which means prepubescent or just pubescent, small, iskos is diminutive, and is defined as mikron, small. Normally puberty hits like 8 to 12-ish in antiquity, and so this word is also used to describe as a child slave. So it's just a small, young, prepubescent boy. And a certain someone was following along as if in a military regime fashion as a servant with him, and having been wrapped, peribiblimenos, having been wrapped with a sindon, which a sindon implies a bandage. It's a surgical grade fine linen cloth, and based on the context, we can understand that it's bandage upon his nakedness. Wrapping and vague nakedness implies private parts. A finger or limb would be specified in the Greek. And they seized and held him, the one, or he, but leaving behind the sindon, he ran naked away. He fled and ran away. So we ask, why was he in a public park with a naked boy? And this is mostly to just get you into studying the Greek and to like how this all comes together, which is in the mystery. And so we want to study this because it provides context for what the mystery rites were and what the Christian and Judaic monks were corrupting, and what the theocratic governments were erasing since. And it has affected drug prohibition, women's place in leadership, and even today. So, yeah. So I'm going to talk now about mystery and what the mysteries were to understand kind of like the history before Jesus, essentially. So in Genesis it says, instead of God it uses this word kurios. And in fact you can create a kurios through using pharmacon or a drug. It was a lord, this common translation, but it was also the master or ruler of an immediate realm or dominion, specifically one who has power over life and death. And how would you do that? Through these death and rebirth drugs. It's also a cult term to describe one who's gone through this death and rebirth initiation, as seen in these cults of Eleusis, Isis, and Dionysus. And in the ancient Greek, it becomes clear how these pre-Christian activities were something that Jesus was born into and were inverted mystery rites which he was performing. What were these mysteries and how were they inverted? So temple worship and Christian communion are both direct product and development of late Bronze Age ritual orgy. So-called echidnaic eos is venom, echidnaic rites sprang from the genius of a single pre-classical venom specialist who was a female immigrant to ancient Georgia who pioneered the use of her vagina as a device for bioengineering and administering psychotropic substances to religious initiates. This was very, very long time ago. So this is like what sprung these rites, which were very expansive. They were happening everywhere, from Egypt to like Italy, right? And so Amen says these Bronze Age acolytes, ritually known as dragons and wolves, consumed the fluids of priestesses to induce. And they also, it was a potion also containing other stuff that they would insert into themselves, and out came these drugs, right? So it balanced life and death. They would take these antidotes for these these viper venoms, and taken directly from the breast of these priestesses. That is, Bronze Age women researched and pioneered a means of using biochemistry of the female body to create this polypharmaceutical drug. So in experimenting with this and the use of venoms, they developed early Western mystery religion and medicine and farming. Their symbol was the caduceus, as you can see on the mural. It's the snakes intertwined around the rod, used even now in medical associations. These rites evolved under the influence of pre-Christian Baptist. Baptist was a word to describe one who dips. It was specifically using males instead of females. So the view of these sexual rites were very different than how we would perceive somebody doing that today. So they switched from the female source to a male source, and using young boys. This is before Jesus. As you can see, 200 BCE until the time of Jesus was when that developed. And that is exactly what John the Baptist was doing, which we'll see in a couple of weeks when we read that text. But it's quite interesting. These traditions help to explain why Jesus, after taking the cup of God, was himself arrested in public park late at night with a naked boy. Because what was he doing? He was collecting the liquids to have an antidote to the venom that he took in the, what's it called? The Last Supper. Eat my flesh, drink my blood. So Galen says the milk of the Parstinos, which was a young girl, she began to lactate, used as a component against venom, particularly of serpents, such as the viper of the dipsets. So this is what the mystery was vaguely. Used what's called the burning purple. It was like this snail or a mollusk extracted, and it had psychoactive venom dye, and inducing visionary death-like states. I would assume that there are other potion recipes that contain like 22 substances to like 200, right? And so, being exposed from a young age, these priestesses would be able to produce this venom through lactation and ejaculate. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is the venom for?
inducing altered states of consciousness.
And then to bring them back to sanity?
Yeah, because
They
it's
have-
poison, they have
okay.
to have an antidote
Okay,
to bring
gotcha.
them back.
Just
or
wanted to
else-
make sure I was following.
Yeah. So the initiate is given the purple venom compound rectally or vaginally via alabaster wand, and then the priestess sings during the process, inducing this dissociation and entrancement, and it was considered the most important part. And the initiate is bound, drugged. Sounds worse than it probably was, but it probably was to this experience of like ecstasy, right? Or terror, who knows? But it resurrects the initiate from this near-death experience due to the venom, and this results in a complete transformation, this psychic death and rebirth, and then this initiate becomes Ionios outside of the time stream mentally during the initiation ceremony, because in John 3:16 it doesn't use the word eternal life, it says ionic life, entering this ion. So the initiate's face smelled like a brothel afterwards, is what the text says. Yeah.
wow, that's a lot of
Uh-huh.
urine and
Yeah,
ejaculation.
isn't that insane? Yeah, that's why.
That's crazy.
This is
Like,
Medea. She's the one, the first one. She's the first historical Christ. This word Christ, we'll go into what that means. But the first attestation, the first documentation of Christing activities, found in surviving texts from forever ago, 462 BCE, and older texts have been lost. She herself lived 13 to 12th century BC as she ruled the Colchis Empire that's around the Black Sea. It's Babylon. She was the queen of Babylon. So she created this first mystery rite, which became the Bacchic mystery that spread across the ancient world. She founded this tradition based on creating mania, creating an image, and ritual drug use, invented fumigation rituals and complex initiatory ceremonies. She constructed an idol of Artemis, filled it with drugs, disguised herself as an old woman, freaked everyone out, and introduced it to the city, and then brought everyone ecstasy and mania. And her rite was seen as the origin of civilization's religious inclinations. She's associated with the rise of the Medes, who changed their name from the Aryans to the Medes, who may have named themselves in her honor. And she created the original gospel, which the word gospel, and first a rite of initiation transformation attributed to her by Diodorus of Sicily. She's the foundress of the global rite that predated and was later imitated and corrupted by figures like Heracles, Moses, and Jesus, and she left a huge legacy in architecture, healing, pharmacology, medicine, religious institutions across East and West. She's associated with sacred towers, hospitals, and monuments bearing her name in the Black Sea region. She is the first Christ. Pindar quotes her, saying, "She, Medea, swiftly revealed how to accomplish these tasks. She mixed these drugs with olive oil, gave remedy of grievous pains, and she Christed him with it, and they agreed with each other to a sweet marriage." There's another one from Euripides, Medea, where it says, "Never, O lady, may you unleash upon me from golden bows, or inescapable arrow, having applied the medicated salve with desire." Interesting. That was supposed to be another video that's not working.
So how, I don't understand the last text that, the last two that are referring to Christ how?
Okay, so we'll go into what Christ is, but a Christ, well, I'll just go ahead now. Because a Christ is one who applies a medicated salve or oil or dye and applies it. And a Christ person is one who applies it. The Christ itself is a verb which means to apply the salve. So, Creole and its participle Christos are grounded in everyday medical domestic Greek language usage. There are 200,000 plus uses of this word Creole used in a pharmacological way. It's really old. Denotes smearing, rubbing, applying medicated salve, oils, perfumes. Like one of the oldest ones refers to Aphrodite. She applied these ambroial oils. Homer refers to that usage of Christ. So a Christ is someone that Christs themselves and others, and applying a pharmacon-based salve or unguent. How do you say that? Christ. Christening, yes. Christ comes from the ancient word stem cur. So, but yeah, it goes back to 700, 650 BCE, Homer. Christos, Creole, Chrisassa. That's what the word means historically. So, what about Jesus? Jesus the Christ. Christ is his title. Like Bob the Builder, Jesus the Christer. So both Medea and Jesus Christ themselves, right? Oh, and other people. It's the less use of the word her as seen in source texts that go back to 650 BC. I'm really cold here. Yeah. Oh wow. Tested in 3,000 source texts, older than Jesus, which you can search in the TLG, Homer, Euripides, and others. Nothing to do with mystical elevation nor with ceremonial consecration. It's known as drug magic or pharmacum magia. In Hippocrates, Dioscorides, Galen, it's used to just apply a salve or rub with ointment. But only after the 1st, 2nd century, it referred to ceremonial mystical gloss onto it, associating it with Semitic Messiah, and they became kind of intermingled in meaning. And then it detached from original Greek pharmaco-medical register. So again, like Hebrew, Latin, English, stripped everything referring to pharmacology and medicine and ritual and so we ask ourselves, is this what Jesus was doing? You'll just have to see for yourself. So, yes, lots of Christing. So, it did not mean anointing until 1300 AD, and until the Latin Christianized lens. And that's something that people are always like, no, it means anointing. I'm like, that's not what it meant until a long time after Jesus, right? So this is kind of reiterating what we already talked about, mapping it correctly from a Hellenic mystery lens and framework. So someone who's a Christos can be a Messiah, but a Messiah is not a Christos. So Jesus in the text with both, but one doesn't imply the other all the time. You can Christ your eyes, but it also in Creole. See how it's the omega. It can be a sting or prick with poison. So it has to do with topical application. They Christed arrows with poison. That's something that temple guardians did and ancient Scythians did. And so there's an overwhelming amount of usage of Christ in antiquity using it as a drug term. So again, it's not anointing until Christian Latinized interpretation.
So Medea was the first to christen somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like in literature, so
Okay.
that we have documented. Right. So, yes. I'm just saying the same things over and over, but it's just Christ Mr. Rubs me reply will. These are just all the things.
And you can
So-
you can send this, right, to if anybody wanted
Yeah, if
to,
anybody wants these slides, they
slides,
can
yeah.
look at them. But, yeah, so the Latin Church redefined Creole by 400. 82 means sacred unction, borrowing from the Latin unguo, not anoint. So the word anoint itself is much later. So now, here's the actual text. I'll try to hurry up for you. Before,
I'll rewatch the live stream. So let me
Okay.
go before
Sure.
you get going so I don't
No
interrupt.
So we're going to go
lovely.
into Matthew 1 through 25. And I'll be fairly quick because it's
That's
mostly
another
like
one.
genealogy. Okay, so mostly genealogy. I wanted to start. It's
Thank you
good
so
to
much
see
for
you.
coming. I
Thank you for
appreciate it.
coming.
Yes, absolutely. Great. I will go back on the live stream.
See you. So, in the beginning of Matthew, it says, the origin source of this book begins with Jesus, who Christ, Biblos, Geneseos, so it's like Genesis, right? The origin, beginning of Iesu Christu, the inheritor, or a son, inheritor of the nature of the family lineage, is a lot more beautiful to say, of David, son of Abraham, or Abraham. highlighted this word, it means origin, source, manner of birth, or his descent, beginning. And, I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, again, means in the LSJ, in the lexicon, means to be rubbed on, used as ointment. These are all the people who you can look up and read their texts and how they use it. Anointing is what it says in there, but as we know, it's not till later, right? So, of persons, anointed, see, drives me nuts though, but means to be rubbed on, used as an ointment.
Christed.
Christed. Then we have this word, it means to be brought forth or generated. And so Abraham brought forth and called Isaac into existence. Isaac brought forth Jacob. Jacob brought forth Judah and the brothers that he had. So we have that word. To beget, to be a father of, to produce, grow, engender, call into existence. This is my favorite interpretation of the word. So, Judah brought forth Pharez, and Zerah forth from Tamar, and Perez brought forth Hezron. Hezron brought forth Aram. Aram brought forth Amminadab. Amminadab brought forth Nahshon. Nahshon brought forth Salmon. So these are all just, it's just genealogy. And it's really interesting because it's 14, 14, 14. But there's some mix-ups. Matthew just purposefully makes it 14, 14, 14 so that it lines up, is what I read. But there's like some people removed, some other people added, so it's not entirely accurate as 14, 14, 14. So, what? Okay, so Solomon brought forth Boaz. Out from Rahab, Boaz brought forth Obed. Out from Ruth, Obed brought forth Jesse. Jesse brought forth King David, who brought forth Solomon, out from which he brought forth Uriah. And again, we have from David all the way to, where are we at? To the captivity of Babylon, which was, and is interesting that it's documented because it's, I guess, from what I've researched, it's supposedly the Babylonian captivity was around 540-ish BCE. So why wouldn't they have that in Hebrew is what I want, right? Okay, I don't know. But, so, thereafter, the removal of Babylon, and then the lineage continues. I headed that word, did I add it? Let's see. No, I didn't, but I think I meant to. It's okay. So we have that until Jacob, and as we know, Jacob is the father of Joseph, the husbandman of Mary, the one who brought forth Jesus, the chosen name of the one who applies the medicated salve or oil. So, see, it says, therefore the whole descent out from Abram until David's lineage was 10 and 4. This amazing word, dekates ares. 10 and 4, out from David until the Babylonian captivity, his lineage was 10 and 4. And out from the Babylonian captivity to the lineage of the Christo is 10 and 4. There's one other thing I wanted to share if we get there. Not yet, okay. But the origins of Jesus, the one who applies a drug, came into being with this in view. His mother, of the daylight, source of Olympia, that was what I found, relating to Mary's name, was being sought out in marriage to Joseph. Before they were joined as one, they discovered she was being inhabited within her womb, brought as an offering from immaterial spirit. That's the pneuma, wherever it went, pneumatos, right? Being sacred, dio, devoted to the gods, is another word for holy. So that word come together, sunel thein, come together, united, banded together, form a league, couple. So the husband of hers, Joseph, observant of duty and customs, and not willing to make a show or trial of her, made a wish on the sly and unbeknownst to her to release her and detach from her. But this, I included wish because that's what he's talking about. This of his which formed within his heart and conspired a plan, behold, a angelos, which is a messenger god of Kyriou, means the, as we discussed before, ruler of immediate ruler of the realm, a messenger god, within the dream state, was brought to light, revealed to him, saying, Joseph, child of the lineage of David, don't be terrified or put to flight to receive of another and promise to marry. So it's basically saying, don't receive of another and don't be terrified of the messenger god in the dream state, because in her is the conception of an immaterial spirit of which is devoted to the gods of hope. And generated, birthing the child who will be summoned or called the name of his. Iesun, Jason, because he preserves and saves from death humanity's errors and failures. Yeah, or fears. This then wholly came into being so that what was said would be made full by the principal powers, that's a word that I'm using instead of the Kyriou, through the prophets, which is prophetu, who were keepers of the oracles, that's a translation, or that's what it means, that were collected. Keepers of the oracles. I don't know, just even reading it again, it's like, wow. Behold, this Parthenos, which is a virgin priestess, she will be bellied full as an eclipse, inhabited and possessed by the child she births, and they will call by the name of his Emmanuel, the being which translates into the language which I want to communicate to us, the God. That's the transliteration. Which is interesting. And arising from his sleep, Joseph did what had been ordered from his messenger God, and took with himself, receiving what was transmitted, the woman of his, and did not have sex with her until the birthing of her child, summoned and called his name Yesu, Jason. Yep. So that is the first chapter of Matthew. We've made it. Does anybody have any questions?
It's important to realize that Parthenos, that virgin, has nothing to do with the hymen.
Really?
Has nothing to do with it. It's a virgin priestess who has not yet had a child and is fertile.
Wow.
So priestesses often have sexual duties.
Right, that's
And
interesting.
so they had abortifacient drugs given to them by the temple
Yeah.
to help them avoid pregnancy. And so
Yeah, so somebody slipped up, right?
usually, yeah, somebody slipped up or they just decided to have their first child.
Yeah.
And so like a virgin birth isn't spectacular, it's not supernatural, it's a mundane thing.
Mm-hmm.
For
Because the
Parthenos.
interpretation of what a virgin was different in
Right.
antiquity than what we would think of as being. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.